So one of the things too, before I get into this, I know typically with workshops we save the questions and answers to the end. And however, throughout this workshop, I would like to entertain questions and answers because there's quite a bit of material here, and I'm afraid if we wait to the end, we may run out of time, and I may not be able to adequately address questions. And so microaggressions. What are microaggressions? Pierce first coined the term racial microaggressions in 1978 to refer to everyday, subtle, and often automatic put downs and insults towards Black Americans. And while Pierce's theory focused on solely on racial microaggressions, it's clear that microaggressions can be expressed towards any marginalized group in our society. You know, I remember back in the 70s, incidentally, many of the sitcoms, Good Times, Sanford and Son. I don't know if you guys remember any of these sitcoms, but they were replete with microaggressions. In fact, microaggressions is what made for the comedy in many of these sitcoms. And later on, I think later in the early 80s with the Jeffersons and Wheezy Jefferson and George Jefferson and their daughter, their son being engaged to a young lady who had a white dad and a Black mom, and so the dynamic around the sitcom was really predicated on microaggressions, and so microaggressions are they're very insidious, but they're so even though they're insidious, they're very commonplace. And so microaggressions are similar to aversive racism in that they generally occur outside or below the conscious level of well-intended people. And so many people who exhibit microaggressions don't even realize that they're microaggressive. And so that is why it's so important for us to understand and to recognize microaggressions. When we look at microaggressions, according to Daryl Wayne Sue, there are 3 types of microaggressions. We have microassaults, we have microinsults, and we have microinvalidations. Microassaults are conscious, deliberate, and either subtle or explicit racial, gender, or sexual orientation bias attitudes, beliefs, or behaviors that are communicated to marginalized groups. Sorry, y'all. And these behaviors or these attitudes are communicated through environmental cues, verbalizations, or behaviors. They are meant to attack the group identity of the person or to harm the intended victim through name calling or avoidant behavior or purposeful discriminatory actions. And examples of verbal microassaults, and we've heard them all, are racial epithets referring to African Americans as niggers, Chinese Americans as chinks, Japanese Americans as Japs, women as bitches and cunts, and gays as fags. These are all verbal microassaults and are, and even though they fall under the umbrella of microaggression, I dare not uh, uh, say that they're quite majorly aggressive. The second type of microaggression are microinsults. And microinsults are characterized by interpersonal or environmental communications that convey stereotypes, rudeness, and insensitivity that demeans a person's racial, gender, sexual orientation, their heritage, or identity. And microassaults represent subtle snubs or frequently outside of the conscious awareness of the perpetrator, but they convey a hidden insulting message to the recipient. And so an example of a micro insult would be if I were in the mall shopping and I were to be looked at or followed as if I'm going to steal something. There is a hidden message there, an hidden insulting message that my kind is prone to steal, and so or my kind needs to be watched carefully. And so one of the things we have to understand with microaggressions is that there's always a hidden message with the microaggression. There's always something underneath. And so what you see on the surface is there's quite a bit of perhaps animosity brewing underneath. And the third type of microaggression is microinvalidation or microinvalidations. And microinvalidations are characterized by communications or environmental cues that negate or nullify the psychological thoughts and the feelings or experiential reality of certain groups, such as people of color and women and LGBTs. And in many ways, microinvalidations really are the most damaging form of microaggressions because they directly and insidiously deny the racial, gender, or sexual orientation reality of these groups. And as an African American, to downplay my experience, whether it's my current experience or my historical experience, my experience of slavery that has been passed down generationally, to deny this this is very damaging in that it denies my experiential reality. And according to Sue, to impose reality upon marginalized groups represent the ultimate form of oppression. When we deny a group's or a person or groups experiential reality and then impose our reality onto that group, we're saying that your reality doesn't matter, and the reality to ascribe to is that of the oppressor, or the one that is the perpetrator of the microaggression. A simple micro invalidation can be heard in statements such as, man, I'm the low man on the totem pole. You know, this is very insulting, and it denies the experiential reality of Native Americans. And so and let me say this about microinvalidations. They're so insidious that oh man, so often we don't recognize. And when I think of microinvalidation, oftentimes my mind goes to what we have done in America, what we have done to and how we continue to treat women. and we invalidate the experiential reality of women in our culture, even when it all the way down to their body, is as if women don't own their body, but men have control over the female body and what they should do with their body and or their sexuality. It's almost even though it's insidious, the damage is much like that is like we see in some other countries where we have female genital mutilation, where there is the notion that a woman is not supposed to experience sexual pleasure, and so therefore their clitoris has to be surgically removed in this what I believe is a horrendous act, and uh, certainly denying the experiential reality. But microaggressions and how we treat women are much like that. It's just as damaging, just as damaging. And so, um, and so, when it comes to microaggressions in the realm of racial microaggressions, studies indicate that racial microaggressions are triggers to difficult dialogues on race, whether it's in the workplace or in the classroom, and 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 is incidentally, as we have grown to understand a little bit about microaggressions, a lot of times we use this knowledge as a weapon to point out that someone is uh, um, using a microaggression. And that's a microaggression. And but according to Sue, microaggressions were never intended to shut down dialogue, but rather to uh, um, uh, uh, open the door for dialogue, to facilitate dialogue. And so when we call out microaggressions, which is very important to name microaggressions, we can't do it in a way to attack or to demean or to fight fire with fire, because again, we shut down dialogue. And uh, and so when we look at it in the classroom, students and professors are often confused by what is going on in the classroom when a microaggression is transpiring. And white students and professors are very hung up on clarifying these racial interactions for fear of appearing racist. And I'm going to talk about this a little bit later as we touch on, and I know it's not in the objectives, but I thought it was very important to include just a little bit on critical race theory, as we will talk about a little bit later.
Nathaniel?
Yes.
I believe you had a question in the chat.
Oh.
It's from Robert Elliott. It says, would this be like discriminatory gaslight?
Absolutely. Yes, it is. Yes. Tell me, give me an example. How would you think it would be?
Yeah, so I mean, this idea that, telling people that, for example, that there's no racism today in America, and it's all in the past, like that's I think been described as discriminatory gaslighting. Um, and that's a form of invalidation. That was my point, is that I hadn't realized the connection to the microinvalidation concept in the microaggression framework.
Absolutely. And a type of racism that falls under that will be colorblind racism.
Right.
And so when I hear people say, I don't see color. And first of all, I mean, goodness, unless something is medically wrong, to say you don't see color, you're lying, you know. And so we see color. We may try to pretend not to see it. Perhaps we don't want to see it, but to say you don't see color as a way to deny the fact that color exists, you are actually denying a person's experiential reality. You know, to say to me as a Black male in America, you know, Nathaniel, I'm going to be honest, guy. I just don't see color, and I don't see you as a Black male. Well, if that's the case, you don't have to see me as a male. Maybe you don't even see me as a human, you know, because you are denying my experiential reality. And so
it looks like you have maybe one more question, or at least comment, from Christopher. So it says, seems like the denial of opportunities to teach and learn about critical race theory are macro/microaggressions toward even having room for dialogue and ownership of these realities. So they're just curious.
Oh, Christopher, thanks for mentioning that. I was just called on this week, and I've been tied up in an article for the Gazette newspaper here in Colorado on critical race theory, and the question at hand was, should critical race theory be taught in the classroom? And of course, the newspaper's stance is pretty conservative and somewhat in concert with our past political administration and that climate, and that it really supports not teaching about critical race theory or microaggressions or anything relative to the topic of race in the classroom. And I'm reading your question here. Seems like the denial of opportunities to teach and learn about critical race theory are and yes, it is. It is microaggressive. Is microaggressive in that there's a hidden message in that. And remember, I said microaggressions, there's always this hidden message. And even though the denial to teach may seem very innocent, the hidden message is race doesn't matter. Well, the topic of race, who doesn't it matter to? It doesn't matter really to those who are marginalized. To not talk about it, certainly it matters. I mean, to not talk about it, it may not matter to those who are in the position to deny race, but it very much matters to marginalized groups. I know we don't sometimes the whole thing with Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter was really looked upon as being a threatening, almost a militia, when really the premise of Black Lives Matter was really to get America to understand that because all lives matter, Black lives matter too. And so, to say that Black lives don't matter, to say that Chinese American lives don't matter, is certainly microinvalidations, which are again the most damaging type of microaggression. Did I somewhat touch on that, Chris?
Yeah, and thank you so much. It's such a complicated issue in some ways, and to me, it's also so simple in another way, and it's where our country is at. I mean, it's heartbreaking to see these opportunities shut down at a time where we couldn't need it any. We need this. I have two sisters as teachers who try to figure out ways to introduce things into the classroom, and of course they're handed curriculums and told to stay in their lane in certain ways, and they flex that where they can. But my one sister in New Orleans, she faces a lot of conservative pressures, and tries to figure out, again, how do you make room for some dialogue and some acknowledgement and validation that this is real, and it's not. It's actually been a shame that we have not been able to do this sooner. I think many people in this conversation probably grew up in reading textbooks that wrote the history certain ways, and trying to kind of open up room to look at there may be other realities that we really need to acknowledge and come to terms with.
Absolutely, and if we don't teach critical race theory, if we don't teach about microaggressions, then we perpetuate the lies that we were taught. I remember vividly, supporting and because I was a little patriotic, little nerdy little kid, and I just really believed everything that came before me patriotically, and America to me was just like, it was to me, in my little mind, my young mind, it was somewhat of almost a utopia, and I really I was heartbroken to discover that Christopher Columbus did not discover America, because this is what I grew up with, and I believed it. I believed it just like I believed in God, almost, that Christopher Columbus discovered America, or George Washington chopped down the cherry tree, whatever. Not that even mattered if he chopped down the cherry tree or not. But these lies we were taught, come to find out, George Washington never did chop down a cherry tree, and so and these are just minor and just some of the few examples of some of the lies that we have been taught in academia, and many of the lies that we have been taught are lies of to perpetuate the white savior mentality, and to make the white male appear more glorious than what he is, and to cover the atrocities that have occurred as a result of his I want to say maybe demonic nature, maybe, and just the evils thereof we have downplayed and even hid. But my thought to that is, if we have taught these lies and we have lived these lies for since the inception of America, and we see the harm that it has caused, I would think that if there ever was a time that truths should be taught, now is the time. And we call ourselves home of the brave and land of the free. Well, if we're brave, then we are able to deal with and teach the truth. But if we can't deal with the truth, then we are yet cowards. We're not home of the brave. And subsequently, this cannot be land of the free, because we are living lies. And we know the old adage that you should know the truth, and it's the truth that shall make you free. And so to live in a society that is uh, 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 built upon and by lies, then it's not really a life, is it we're worth living, so to speak. If people of color, if LGBTQ, if marginalized groups can experience discrimination and oppression, then surely white children can learn about it. Surely. And so that's my premise on this, on teaching microaggressions and race relations and critical race theory in the class. I think it must be taught. And I believe this too, and I don't want to get on a tangent here. I believe as a society, I think the fight against it is so strong now, because I think we recognize that it must and should be taught. And it scares the crap out of us, because the truth is at hand. And so people are like freaking out, teaching it in the class. We got to understand, it's not going to feel good. The truth sometimes hurts, but it's yet the truth. And in the long run, I think we will heal as a nation if we were to learn to deal with and accept the truth. I think this is so important, particularly as I get a little older and I look at our youth, and I teach young people. We're looking at our future. These students are our future. Do we want our future to rest in the hands of those who are simply living lies or perpetuating lies? Or as I get older, I want my future to be in the hand of those who recognize and operate with integrity, dealing with the truth that, hey, there's some things in America that just downright sucks, and we need to look at this. And so, yes, indeed. And so from womb to tomb. I just like that statement, from womb to tomb, because I happen to teach human growth and development, and I tell my students, we learn everything from the womb to tomb, from birth to death. And but I incorporated it here, and that from the time of birth, marginalized persons and groups are bombarded by hidden messages that denote that they are less than, there's something different, that they're broken, or that there's something wrong. I mean, it starts early on, and the infant, the kid in the stroller, if mom is pushing that child of color in the grocery store. And I remember being stationed in Germany, and at that time I did have an infant child, and who was dark brown, and many of those in Germany, they would just get so excited. They love children, the Kinder they call them, but they would comment on my child's skin color, and at that time I didn't think that of a hidden message. I didn't think of any impact, but there is an impact there. The impact is that I'm different from the rest. There's something strange about me. And so white individuals are often unaware of the cumulative harm that people of color experience from being routinely subjected to various racial microaggressions. And so one microaggression may cause some harm, but to experience microaggressions daily, I think one definition of microaggressions says that they are daily denigrating messages. These daily denigrating messages, to live this over the lifespan, people that live this actually show higher incidence of both mental disorders, depression, anxiety, and physical health problems, which actually led to the research shows shorter lifespan. Shorter lifespan. If you are constantly bombarded with a hidden message that you are less than, or that your life doesn't matter as much, and it stands to reason that your lifespan or your life expectancy is going to be shortened. And so existentialism, when we look at existentialism, and I know some would, even though in my slide it says created by the French philosopher Sartre. Sartre was the first to state the fundamental existential doctrine that existence precedes essence, and I do understand that Kierkegaard has been given the credit of pretty much the founder of existentialism, but the premise here is that existence precedes essence, and that our essence is important, but our essence doesn't come first. And so people are born as a blank slate, not so much with essence, but a blank slate of existence. And John Locke coined the term tabula rasa, meaning a blank slate, and create essence we create an essence through our unique experiences. And so as we grow, we develop this essence. And I know with African Americans, Boykin named different characteristics of just African American people, and one of those traits that are found with African American people is movement, and that African Americans can talk with their hands and to move, and this is this constant movement that they have, and we find also communalism, and which is a trait, and that goes back long before the first Africans came to America, and that in Africa they were tribal people, and so they tend to congregate or come together, and certainly here in America that's frowned upon, because as people of color come together, we pose a threat. And so even though we may be communal, and by nature, by action, it is looked upon that we are forming a gang, or we're doing something that is going against the establishment. And so existentialism was built around a number of key insights. I'm sorry, let me address this question. I missed this question. Dr. Granger, do you think the polarized mind phenomenon, as described by Kurt Schneider, enhance microaggressions? Yes, indeed. Can we establish a dialogue between microaggression and decolonial researchers? A little tie tongue here, because a lot of times when I'm teaching my classes, the Kurt Schneider's book the polarized mind, and why is it killing us? Certainly, I believe it enhances microaggressions. I think this polarized way of thinking is one of the sources of racism, because is these extremes, is black white, and when we think of in terms of black white, straight gay, white right wrong, it is these polarizations, and it's these polarizations that tend to other us or distance us from one another, and the further we distance ourselves from one another, we end up we dehumanize the other, and so we see the other as something not quite as human as we are. And so I believe this polarized way of thinking, and certainly going back to the days of slavery, and even though this presentation isn't about slavery, but we got to understand that slavery is a big part of the American history. In fact, it is a greater part of the American history than perhaps even the signing of the Declaration of Independence or the Constitution, in that slavery was here, certainly about 150 years prior to us even becoming a free country, or free from British reign. And so slavery definitely has its place in American history, and it certainly has impacted American history. But if we look at that, just the institution of slavery alone, we can see the perpetuation of this polarized way of thinking, this othering, and this white is right and this black is wrong. And so absolutely, polarized way of the polarized way of thinking. Oh man, it kills us. And so when we look at some existential insight, a perspective that emphasizes, what happened here? Did I miss something? Yes. And so when we look at existential insight, the first insight existentially is that things are really weirder than we think. The world reveals itself to be far stranger and more uncanny than we believe it to be. And so all that glitter isn't gold, and even though we say if it looks like a dog and it barks like a dog and it wags its tail like a dog, then it must be a dog. But I once heard a cat that was raised around dogs that actually was able to cough up a sound that sounded much like a bark. And even though it looked and acted like a dog, it was a cat, but it had been raised with dogs. And so things are weird. Things aren't always as we think they should be. And I think, on a side note, I think this further substantiates the fact that if there is an element of truth, then we need to bring this truth out. We need to, whatever that truth may be, we have to bring it out, because things get pretty funky around here in this thing called the world. And the second insight is that we are free. Acknowledging the first insight is disorienting and scary. Yes, it is. It's scary to recognize that, hey, this thing is not all what it's cracked up to be. There's things that go bump in the night. But Sartre wanted to propose to us for one reason, and that is their freeing aspect. Things do not have to be how they are. In America, racism doesn't have to be. I forgot who it was. I think it was a senator, and I can't remember who it was. It was during our last presidential administration, and the senator said that slavery was a necessary evil. And you can see it trickles down from there, that oppression and all the things that come with it is necessary. No, how can you say that things do not have to be how they are? And so certainly the last insight is that we shouldn't live in bad faith. Bad faith is living without properly embracing freedom. And again, one of the things that ties into freedom, certainly in my mind, and that is truth. Again, you should know the truth. Truth makes us free. Truth liberates us. And if we are living complete lies, then we aren't really as free as we think we are. We're not as free as we would want to be. I believe it was Martin Luther King said that there's, no matter where you're from, where there's Nairobi, Kenya, and or Alabama or Arkansas, there's a cry that's in the heart of every man, and that cry is, I just want to be free. I just want to be free. And so that's existential, just a tip of the iceberg of existential thought. But then humanistic psychology is a perspective that emphasizes the study of the whole person. And humanistic psychologists believe that an individual's behavior is to his inner feelings and self-image. And certainly this is going to tie into how we look at microaggressions. And so when understanding the impact of microaggressions, the impact that microaggressions have on marginalized groups, we can deduce that one's freedoms are infringed upon and behaviors, whether social and or antisocial, are critical and creative attempts at freedom and equality. And so when we look at rioting, that was a big topic here about a year ago or 8, 9 months ago, looking at the behaviors of those who were rioting after the murder of George Floyd. And these behaviors, we can deduce that these behaviors were creative attempts at freedom and equality. And Martin Luther King said that rioting is the voice of the unheard. People felt they weren't being heard. And when we feel as if we aren't being heard, that feeling is a feeling of invalidation. How can I get you to hear me? Not just hear me, how can I get you to validate me? And so I act out in certain ways. I do certain things, but intrinsically, that is a cry or an attempt at freedom and equality. Oh, let me see here. Thank you for your questions and comments. Yes, sir. Right. Oh, and so this definition is pretty lengthy, but this comes directly from APA Division 32, Society for Humanistic Psychology. Humanistic psychology aims to be faithful to the full range of human experience. Its foundation include philosophical humanism, existentialism, and phenomenology. That doesn't want to roll off my tongue. Phenomenology. In the science and profession of psychology, humanistic psychology seeks to develop systematic and rigorous methods of studying human beings and to heal the fragmentary character of contemporary psychology through an ever more comprehensive and integrative approach. Humanistic psychologists are particularly sensitive to uniquely human dimensions such as experiences of creativity and transcendence, and to the quality of human welfare. Accordingly, humanistic psychology aims especially at contributing to psychotherapy, education, theory, philosophy of psychology, research methodology, organization and management, and social responsibility and change. And so we are committed. We are committed to change. We have a responsibility towards social change, particularly when it comes to eradicating the lies that that has in the long run harmed, I should say, both the slave and the slave master, both the children of the slave and the children of the slave master. We have all been harmed by not so much the institution of slavery itself, but the perpetual lies resulting from it. And so 5 basic postulates of humanistic psychology: human beings, and we know this, as humans, supersede the sum of their parts. They cannot be reduced to components. Human beings have their existence in a uniquely human context as well as in cosmic ecology. Human beings are aware of being aware. They are conscious. Human consciousness always includes an awareness of oneself in the context of other people. Very important. No man is an island unto himself, and who we are and how we see ourselves is really based on how, or should I say, in context of humanity and how we have been treated. And so yeah, I'm gonna digress from that just for a minute. Human beings have some choice, and with that, responsibility. And human beings are intentional, aim goals, are aware that they can cause future events and seek meaning, value, and creativity. And so I looking at just a study of diversity and multiculturalism, looking at certainly the research on microaggressions. One of the areas of course I've learned to kind of understand it and operate within the context of existential and humanistic psychologies, and but to look at it from a transpersonal perspective, I struggle with that, and I'm still actually wrapping my head around it, even though on some ways it's really clear as a bell. On others, it's real. On the other hand, it's somewhat ambiguous because I have not seen much research, if any, on the intersection of transpersonal psychology and the study of microaggressions. And so this piece here, there's a fresh piece to some of this a way of looking at microaggressions. This transpersonal piece certainly is a refreshing piece to this. And transpersonal psychology might loosely be called the psychology of spirituality, and of those areas of the human mind which search for higher meanings in life and which move beyond the limited boundaries of the ego to access and enhance capacity for wisdom, creativity, unconditional love, and compassion. It honors the existence of transpersonal experiences and is concerned with their meaning for the individual and with their effect upon behavior. And so just touch on this just a little bit here. And so transpersonal psychology is interested in the continuum of human experience and behavior, ranging from severe dysfunction and mental and emotional illness, and at one end to what is generally considered normal, healthy behavior, and at the other end, and various degrees of normal and maladjusted, maladjustment in between. And so while an exact definition of transpersonal psychology is the subject of debate, transpersonal psychology is a full spectrum of psychology that encompasses all of this and then goes beyond it by adding a serious scholarly interest in the immanent and transcendent dimensions of human experience. Exceptional human functioning, experiences, performances, and achievements, true genius, the nature and meaning of deep religious and mystical experiences, non-ordinary states of consciousness, and how we might foster the fulfillment of our highest potential as human beings. Transpersonal psychology doesn't typically have specific tools or methods, but is rooted in the ideology and a basic humility that kind of operates behind the scenes, and that is less about a particular tool or methodology and more about an intention that motivates the intervention. When I think of just off the top of my head, we mentioned Kurt Schneider earlier in reference to polarized thinking, but when I think of transpersonal psychology, if I were to reference Kurt Schneider, I would reference him in the spiritual aspect of awe, and this is this spiritual component, and it's just, I find it somewhat ironic when I just looking at humanistic, existential humanistic, and then now transpersonal, because when I look at the humanistic piece and humanism, if we really go all the way back to the beginning of humanism, it really originated with the idea of putting deity on the back burner, and in some cases to the point of non-existence. Whereas, and with that, putting humans as center. And then when I look at transpersonal psychology, on the other hand, transpersonal is it takes a position of humility, and that there is something perhaps higher or bigger than ourselves. And so with transpersonal psychology, we have to understand that relationships are key. And transpersonal psychology is an approach to understand how our minds operate through our relationships with others, resting in the belief that there is something bigger and deeper in the space between which operates upon us. And it's interesting. I think of the term namaste when you meet someone for the first time, and it seems as if you've known them forever, and there's almost an instantaneous connection, and there's a vibe there, and your higher self connects with their higher self, and it's really a beautiful phenomenon. I remember some years ago being in the marketplace in Malaysia, and people were everywhere, monkeys were everywhere, and I was there for like many hours, just really enjoying myself and the company with some of my humanistic family. But I noticed there was this gentleman in the marketplace that for some reason or the other, we kept crossing paths. And I would look at him and he would look at me and we would catch eye. And there was just this unspoken admiration. But we would not address it. We recognized it, but we would not address it. And after playing this or doing this dance, as it were, for perhaps at least a couple of hours, and we through the crowds, it circled back around, and once again, me and this gentleman were back face to face. And this time, we decided to talk. We decided to have a conversation, and we stood there for about 45 minutes or so conversating, and he didn't speak English and I didn't speak Mandarin. But we talked, we communicated, and we could not understand the language, but we had a beautiful time and we parted. And it was something about that relationship that speaks to the transpersonal experiences that we have in our relationships that actually transcend the linguistic skills of man. And so it's something that's bigger and outside of our language. It's something, there's a chemistry there. There's a as it were, a lack of a better term, a spiritual essence that there's something that actually transcends even our conscious mind. Sometimes your conscious mind would tell you when it comes to interacting with another, your conscious mind would tell you that, term that I don't like using. I can't stand when I hear it, but it's a popular term. It is what it is. Well, no, it's not necessarily is what it is. Sometimes it is what it isn't, or it isn't what it is. And so in my conscious mind, you may even with the client, you may in your conscious mind say, I'm going to keep a very objective approach to psychotherapy. I'm going to keep my distance. I'm going to keep this thing very sterile, and ultimately, I'm going to fix this client. But when we approach it from a transpersonal perspective, we take on this place of humility, and then you can't keep it sterile. It's not altogether objective. It's sometimes it becomes even subjective. And so what happens is your client receives from you, but you receive just as much from the client, and it becomes a relationship that transcends what you originally thought it should be, because now it's operating on a much higher plane. And so I think this transpersonal piece, or this transpersonal component, has a great deal even at how we look at microaggressions, because these subtle put downs, yes, it can impact me, perhaps the way I think of myself, or how I may think of others, certainly in the term of prejudices. However, there is this other component, this transpersonal component, that somewhat forces me or coerces me to look at something that is beyond what is transpiring naturally. And so I like to think of it, well, let's look at this next term, spiritual bypassing. Spiritual bypassing is this term coined by John Wellwood. He was a prominent psychotherapist and author in the field of transpersonal psychology. The foundation of spiritual bypassing is basically avoidance and repression. And for some individuals, spirituality serves as a way to rise above or handle the shaky ground beneath. this prominent televangelist, Jesse Duplantis, once said that in reference to African Americans, and he actually went all the way back to slavery, and he said that, and I'm paraphrasing here, he said with the atrocities that Black people have had to contend with from slavery on, he said that most cultures of the world, most people of the world would have failed to exist. They would have been wiped out. And in many, as we know, many indigenous people were killed during colonization, were wiped out during colonization. But Jesse Duplantis said, but it was one thing about these African slaves. He said that while they were being beat and their women were being raped and their children lynched and hung in the trees, he said these people continued to work, and while they were working, they continued to sing Amazing Grace. They somehow, some way found a strength or a resolve in their spirituality. And so it speaks to, even as marginalized groups, whether LGBTQ, whether Latinx or people of color, BIPOC, marginalized groups, when you are in a position, when you recognize there's another people or another group that is over you and oppressing you, you develop a type of spirituality to help transcend the oppression or the microaggressive nature of what is happening from the oppressor. You almost have to, in order to survive, in order to find a semblance of psychological well-being, you have to get to a place where you recognize that there's something more. This can't be just the way it is. And so one of the things with spiritual bypassing that we have to be careful about spiritual bypassing is that sometimes, and I'll talk about this just a little later, that we have to not be quick to point the finger or to call it out that a person is using spiritual bypassing as a way of avoiding their hardships or avoiding their traumas, and as a way to avoid treatment, or that they are repressing some past traumas, because that may not always be the case. Sometimes a person's spirituality is actually two things. It could be it could be cultural, and also two, it could be becomes a very part of who they are, not as a tool to repress or to deny the experiential reality of pain and suffering. Any thoughts? And so I kind of skipped some stuff here. Let me go back here a little bit. And so one of the things with transpersonal psychology, another thing with transpersonal psychology is that, and I think with humanistic psychology, we try to predicate ourselves on this fact, and that is that the therapist isn't viewed as the expert. I think that is more the case with transpersonal psychology, just by reason of the looseness as far as adhering to any type of treatment modality. And so with transpersonal psychology, the therapist is the facilitator who assists the client in uncovering their truth and their own process. And so there's no big I, little you. And so the only room for the expertise is the therapist's ability to reflect the client's own truth back to them with as little of the therapist's own baggage as possible. And so that's it. You pretty much, it's not about you as the therapist. I know you're Dr. Smith, and I know you've earned your degree, but in this therapy session, it's so not about you, but rather about us and the relationship. And so Amy Cicera, this is from David. Amy Cicera of Martinique wrote in his Cahiers of this capacity to move beyond living in oppression to living in transcendence. Yes, man, thank you, David, for sharing that. Wow. It's so, I experientially, I can only speak as from a place of being a Black man, growing up in the ghetto, inner city Chicago. Experientially, I don't know any other experience. But living in that oppressive state, for the most part, it was a very happy life. It was a life I don't regret. And I think that is a result of living in transcendence. You live in a place that is above your situation, so much so, and I've heard this not just with my personal, I've said it, but I've heard it in my studies where people would say, we were poor, we just didn't know we were poor. Even if there's a reference to what affluence may be, it is something about being in that state and living in transcendence that you don't realize how bad it is. Certainly that is a beautiful place to a beautiful capacity for us to have, but sometimes it can also be it can work to our detriment. I think this is what spiritual bypassing is really speaking to, is when we use our spirituality to deny what is really going on, or to be so transcendent. Well, an example that comes to mind is Harriet Tubman and the Underground Railroad, and where Harriet Tubman said, I freed thousands of slaves. I would have freed thousands more had they realized they were slaves. These slaves, many slaves, with the atrocities of what was going on, the lynching, and unimaginable, unimaginable brutality. When she had freed them, many of them just didn't want to be free because they didn't even realize they were slaves. They didn't realize the degradation of their lives. And so it's really because they have perhaps had transcended to a point. And And so it's sad when we that's just the opposite way, or the transcendence swinging the other way. Andrew says, good points about the relationship between microaggressions and transpersonal psychology. Nathaniel, humility, relational space, etc. Might we also say that microaggressions could be conceptualized, as Wilbur put it, a form of resistance to the possibility of transpersonal spiritual development beyond one's current position? That is, ability to take the existential leap towards self-transcendence and embracing other as self beyond skin encapsulated ego. Man, Andrew, you know what? When I was working on this presentation and certainly looking at transpersonal psychology, I found myself in the conundrum because I was trying to link transpersonal psychology to transpersonal analyses. And whereas with transpersonal analyses, one of the I guess the tenets within transpersonal analysis is I'm okay, you're okay. And to look at relationships, you find yourself in a position and you can look at it from several different ways, and whether it can be completely pessimist or completely optimist, but with transpersonal analysis, and sometimes we show up or we come to the scene with the mindset I'm not okay, and you're not okay, and so it's this thought of a way of pessimism that pretty much says that we're all doomed. We're all on our way to hell in a handbasket. This whole thing is about to blow up, so it really doesn't matter. And we take on this air of apathy. And so I'm not okay, you're not okay. And if I believe that, and if I operate from this place that I'm not okay and you're not okay, then certainly I would not allow space for transcendence. In fact, I would try to further demoralize you as I have demoralized myself to maintain this low standard of being this base place because I'm not okay, and to healthily deal with my not okayness, I need to reduce you to a place of not being okay. And so even though you may be okay, I have to make you not okay in my mind in order to deal with my not okayness. And so therefore now I'm not okay, you're not okay. And so it's perpetuated. And I'm not okay, you're not okay. And I perpetuate this further and further, generationally even. I'm not okay, you're not okay. I believe we have to transcend. We have to get to a place where we, again, going back to truths, dealing with truths will help us to deal with this. Because if you're not okay, you're not okay. And part of it is because of your, could be because of your existential guilt. Existential guilt will render you in a place of not being okay, because you have to contend with your existential guilt. No, you're not okay, and you don't want to deal with it. And so what you do is, again, you reduce others. And then, of course, with transactional analysis, there's another piece where again, ties into this microaggression. I'm okay, but you're not okay. And so now we have this positioning of supremacy where white is right, but you're wrong. I'm okay, but you're not okay. And I will continue to operate from this place. And the minute you try to be okay, again, I will make every attempt to reduce you to a place to whereby you're not okay. And this keeps me in this place of superiority. This is why critical race theory is being fought against so vehemently, because of the attack, so to speak, against one's position of white supremacy. The CRT, critical race theory, comes against that. It looks for ways to come against white supremacy, and it tries to see that that all men, according to our Declaration of Independence, that all men are created equal, and it tries to get to this place, you know. But if I hold on to the premise that I'm okay in my whiteness and you're not okay, then surely I would declare that you cannot teach this in school. You cannot teach this to the students. You can't let this get out because it goes against my superiority. And so then, so you have I'm not okay, you're not okay, but now you have I'm okay, you're not okay. And of course, just a side note, we have those with the mindset where they will say, well, I'm not okay, you're not okay. This has been perpetuated through, I heard somebody say polarized thinking, but this has been perpetuated through this structural racism and what happens with microaggressions. Microaggressions put you in a place to whereby you don't feel okay. You're not okay. But I'm not okay, but you're okay. And because of your microaggressive nature, you have made me feel as if I'm not okay. But I recognize that perhaps you're okay. I'm the one with the problem. And it leaves the recipient of the microaggression in a place of confusion. And it, again, like we mentioned earlier, you know, imagine just one microaggression, you know, the impact of one. Imagine living your life, going throughout the lifespan with these messages, these denigrating messages that continue to remind you, I'm not okay, you're okay. And as a result, sometimes in marginalized groups or marginalized cultures, because of this, sometimes we can hear a presentation from a white male. If a white male comes into the room and can teach and say the exact same thing one of the group members is saying, a lot of times the marginalized group will hear what the white male is saying because of this, again, the savior mentality and this positioning of I'm not okay, but you're okay. You're okay, Mr. White Man. You're okay, but no one else. We're not okay. And so even though I don't like the oppression piece, I don't like the microaggressive piece, but I recognize the savior piece. And so it leaves me in a place of confusion, this perpetual confusion. So I don't know, do I trust you? Do I run to you as my savior? I don't know what to do with you because you're so okay and I'm not okay. And then ultimately, of course, we want to get to a place, we want to get to this place, according to transactional analysis, we want to get to a place where I'm okay, you're okay. And that's not to say that I'm a perfect person or you're a perfect person. It means to simply get to a place where I'm okay in my humanness, and I am, and you're okay in your humanness, and I'm okay with your humanness, just as I trust that you're okay with my humanness. And so it's I'm okay, you're okay. And I think this is a position that we are trying to get to, that we strive to get to when we teach and really stay on this course you know, towards equality and what we do as humanistic psychologists, what we do as the Society for Humanistic Psychology. I think we try to get to this place of saying, I'm okay, you're okay. It's this honoring of one another. I get on a tangent, so I don't know if I answered any questions or if I didn't. Or was there a question? So, yes. Yes, it is. Yep. Burns transactional analysis. That's why I was in this conundrum. Is a bit different from the models of transpersonal development I was thinking of, and it is. Either way, I like your application to Burns. Oh, you put the PAC there, and interesting. I'm okay. You're okay. Model to white supremacy and other forms of racism. Andrew, thank you so much for putting that in there. Yeah, yeah. And that's interesting. Even you mentioned even just looking at that, even at the looking at the the PAC. Um, uh, I think sometimes because of oppression, because of microaggressions and the demeaning nature of these denigrating messages, I think it puts us in this position of if we were to look at transactional analysis, I think it puts us in this position of being the child, and being in the child, certainly the perpetrator is in this position of parent. And again, I think ultimately, if we can get to a place that we could facilitate dialogue where it's not a parent-child relationship or even a child-parent relationship, but if we can get to a place where we can facilitate dialogue, I always go back to King where he wanted us to come to this table of brotherhood. If we can come to this table of brotherhood and bring out the lies, the truths, and deal with it all. And I think it brings us to a place where it is adult and adult. We have these adult, very healthy adult relationships. Thank you, Andrew. And so spiritual bypassing, and so some criticisms. Some criticisms to microaggressions, and I've had my work studied, and I've had my work criticized. I'm sure other people who go into the field of studying microaggression have found themselves up against some criticism. Microaggressions have been viewed as overreaction to harmless slights. In other words, it's no big deal. Why are you making a big deal out of nothing? That was almost like an emotional trigger for me, because it may not be a big deal to the perpetrator, but to the one who is receiving this denigrating message that is replete with other hidden messages. Certainly, it's a very big deal. I think it's even a greater deal than overt racism, because with overt racism, or if it were a macroaggression, then I wouldn't be left in confusion. But because it is a microaggression, and just by reason of the insidious nature of the microaggression, it not only has it wounded me, but it has rendered me confused. And so it's almost like if you're gonna stab me. If you're gonna kill me with a knife. Don't kill me with banana pudding. Don't kill me with sugar, or whatever the case might be. Don't poison me with honey. And so Philip says this brings up several distinct memories of hearing microaggressions in professional settings directed at BIPOC colleagues. This needed to be called out. There is a shared hesitation in many of these situations where my BIPOC colleagues have pointed out feeling very vulnerable to call out the behavior and risk further occupational oppression, and white other allied professionals not wanting to come across as white savior, or critically not wanting to speak on behalf of an experience that they haven't had. I have had great discussions after the fact and in the moment with my colleagues about this balance. And I am wondering your thoughts, Dr. Granger. You know, there was a workshop I did some years ago, and there was a white student in the audience, and he came. He I remember his question was, um, he felt I'm paraphrasing, but I remember the feeling was he felt guilty. He felt guilty being a white male. And a lot of times, many of the talks, much of the work around microaggressions is, this is a personal, I should have entered this, but a personal criticism I have is that sometimes when we look at the study of microaggressions, there seems to be this, there's this propensity to demonize the white male. And so sometimes the white male, because of the propensity to demonize the white male, and I don't think this is the intent. The truth is not to demonize. To call it like it is not to demonize. But there seems to be this propensity to demonize the white male. And so you have well-intended allies who want to ally, but they have mixed emotions, and they don't want to come off as savior. If they don't do it, if they don't ally, they don't want to come off as racist. And so I've heard this said that many people who are allies, many whites, feel when it comes to the topic of racism or microaggressions, that they're damned if they do, and they're damned if they don't. And so this gentleman, the student, asked me, he said, what should I do with this? You know, what do I do with and the question was, what do I do with my white privilege? Just by reason of you having something called privilege lets me know that you have a responsibility. You can't just sit on privilege and allow privilege to work positively. And so you have this privilege, you have to do something. You have to continue to walk the walk. You have to continue to dance. Whether it's going to be uncomfortable or not is not based on your warm fuzzies, it's not based on feeling good. You have to be willing to get in the trenches and do the work. And I told him, I said, I remember the conversation, I say, and as far as you feeling guilty about being white, I say, don't feel guilty about being white. In fact, be pro-white. It's okay to be pro-white. I shared with him that I had a conversation once with a buddy of mine, Trent Claypool, and the conversation was simply around the topic of being pro-Black. And he said, Nathaniel, you can say you're pro-Black. He said, but I have a hard time with being pro-white. And I said, why? Yes, I'm pro-Black. I said, and I told him, I said, I think the problem is that we tend to look at pro meaning that you have to be anti something. Pro-Black doesn't make me anti-white. You being pro-white, don't feel guilty about your whiteness. Be pro-white. Be pro-white, but don't be anti-Black in your pro-whiteness. And so I think if we are pro who we are, be pro whoever you are, pro LGBTQ, pro Latino, whatever you are, be pro that. Absolutely, because then it makes you a better advocate for those who are not your culture. It makes you a better person to be able to deal and to work with others. If you come from a place of I'm not okay, then I don't think you could really fully work with others to make others fully okay, and you being okay in the process of doing that. And so yes, you have to. I love this question. I want to let me read this again. I want to make sure I cover some other areas of that. This section. Coming to the point of feeling very vulnerable to call out behavior. Yes, and that is something else too. Uh, um, it is difficult. It's difficult for people of color to uh, call out feeling treated in ways that are unfavorable. One of the reasons is because, first of all, in America, there is a stigma that is placed on people of color. There is a stigma, and this has been perpetuated generationally, that and historically, that because of the color of your skin, you're different. And that's why we're dealing with microaggressions. We've been from womb to tomb. You have been stigmatized. If I, with my stigma, if I were to call out the person who is doing the stigmatizing, or the group or whatever who is doing the stigmatizing, then it further perpetuates my stigmatization in that now I'm a Black man with an attitude. Now it's bad enough I got the stigma of being the Black man, but now I have a bad attitude, or I'm too sensitive, or you just making a mountain out of a molehill. Now I have all these other stigmas that are being imposed upon me. And so maybe it's just better. I'll just squash it. I'll just, just keep it to myself. But then if I keep it to myself, I still have this internal pain, this internal trauma that's going on. So whether if I'm gonna hurt, at least clear my mind, I need to get it out. But it's very hard because the way it comes out, Black people tend to be passionate. People of color are passionate. I was like, yo, man, what is that? What did you just say? Oh, calm down, calm down. I'm not excited. Oh, just calm down, buddy, just calm down. I'm not excited. No, and so so we find ourselves in these positions where the communication process is just shut down, because if I talk about it, something is wrong. If I don't talk about it, something, and so, but I will say this, it is very important to talk about it, but I do recognize this position where you feel vulnerable. You feel vulnerable. But I think the feeling of vulnerable is I think is natural. I think that is an ideal place to actually act upon your vulnerability. Use that as a place, as a springboard to make microaggressions visible, to bring it into awareness. All right. Let me go back here. So another criticism. Yeah, we talked about this. Because studies even have relied, studies around microaggressions, of course, is by reason of microaggression, have relied much on qualitative research, and some have downplayed. And I've found people even in our various walks, because it's not much quantitative data, where they would downplay or even dismiss microaggression significance, and sometimes accuse its recipients of making a mountain out of a molehill. And a reification involves taking something that is abstract, like an idea or a concept, and making it concrete, or assigning a concrete or real existence or value, and is an argument used to invalidate the experiential reality of microaggressions. And so basically, there's this notion that we're taking something and we're taking nothing and making something out of nothing. And again, this goes back to now you're back to the microinvalidation. You have just invalidated my experiential reality. It may not be anything to you, but it is very much something to me. One of the things we got to understand with microaggressions, Microaggressions aren't based on the feeling so much of the perpetrator, but on that of the recipient. I want to touch on this just for, oh, we gotta go. So I threw this in here, critical race theory. So over 40 years ago, critical race theory emerged out of a framework for legal analysis called critical legal studies as an academic concept. The core idea of critical race theory is that racism is a social construct and not just merely the product of individual bias or prejudice, but also something embedded in legal systems and policies. The structural racism is embedded the way we teach our classes in the curriculum. CRT holds adamantly to the premise upon which our Declaration of Independence is predicated. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal. It transcends, it transcends a black-white racial binary and recognizes the fact that racism has impacted the experiences of various people of color, including Latinx, Native Americans, and Asian Americans. This is the truth, the absolute unadulterated truth. CRT challenges white privilege, and that's the problem with it. That is the problem right there. CRT challenges white privilege, a primary factor for its resistance, and exposes deficit-informed research that ignores and often omits the scholarship of people of color. This is critical race theory and why it is important. And so I'm speeding right along. So some clinical, that shouldn't be 4 because that's a wrong number. Disregard that top sentence there. That was supposed to be changed. But nevertheless, these are some considerable considerations. Making the invisible visible. Remember, microaggressions are very invisible. As long as microaggressions remain hidden, invisible, unspoken about, and excused as innocent slights with minimal harm, individuals will continue to insult, demean, alienate, and oppress marginalized groups. And so this, going back to the previous question, this is why we have to make the invisible visible. We have to, it doesn't feel good, but we have to call it out. There's a way to call it out, however, you don't have to call it out, and cussing it out are two different things. The feeling may be to cuss it out, but no, you have to call it out. And so, another clinical consideration is you have to establish expertise and trust. So that's just so big. Acquiring knowledge and understanding of the worldviews of diverse groups and clients are important in providing culturally relevant services. And so if it's outside of your area, then don't work with this group. Don't think that you could work with every group just because you have your PhD or your PsyD. There's some groups you just can't work with, and that's okay. Recognize that. Some groups you may even have some biases. And so we'll see that down in the further bullet. But you have to be able to two things: establish expertise that you know what you know, but also trust. And so it goes back to the therapeutic relationship, and we know that is predicated on trust. And providing. So helping professions, I don't know what happened there. And helping professions must begin with the process of developing culturally appropriate and effective intervention strategies and working with clients different from them. This includes developing skills that involve interventions aimed at organizational structures and policies. Again, why critical race theory is so important. Practices and regulations within institutions, if they are to become culturally competent. And so, so you look at the client, you look at the client's atmosphere, you look at everything about the client. It's all encompassing. It's a comprehensive view of how we treat the client. And as a therapist, we have to be able to not only empathize, because empathy is quite important, be able to walk around in your client's moccasins, but also to not to walk ignorantly. You have to have quite a bit of knowledge as to how to work with this group of clients. In fact, I get quite a few referrals for children, and even though I can probably boast I'm not good at much of anything, but I think I'm a pretty good dad, and so I might wear the T-shirt "Dad of the Year." But whenever I get referred, whenever someone refers a child to me, I have to refer them to someone else because I just know that's probably not my area. That's not my area. And so I'm not going to, even though I can do it, I don't believe the relationship would be one where it's reciprocated. I don't think it'd be, I may be doing my job, but we're working with clients, you know, we really do, we really transcend even the thought of doing our job. If you are doing your job with a client, then you might want to reconsider that therapeutic relationship. That's a key point. I should write that down. If you are just doing your job with the client, you might want to reconsider take another look at the therapeutic relationship. We recognize, yes, it's work, but it's reciprocated work. Like I say, you're giving to the client, but you're also receiving, and it is, again, it's predicated on trust. Physician, heal thyself. It is important for you to deal with your own values, your own biases, your own values, biases, and assumptions about human behavior. And many people, particularly BIPOC individuals, use spirituality as a way to deal with structural racism and the implications of being marginalized. As a clinician, you have to be careful to treat the client's spirituality with the same dignity as their physicality and their mentality. If the client's spirituality is interwoven into their culture and being, it cannot be summed as spiritual bypassing when used as a way to cope. However, as we know, even according to the DSM, religiosity can be viewed as a pathology. And so our culture, although it's outside of our conscious awareness for most of our lives, yet foundational to our development, also determines how we navigate therapy, be it receiving therapy or counseling people from cultures different from our own. Judgments based on skin color. One of your clients come into your office. If you judge that person right away by their skin color, judgments based on skin color make genuine character invisible. And so dealing with the myriad of prejudgmental views of character determined by prejudice, it creates psychological tensions and individuals who feel invisible and serve as a contextual factor impeding the therapeutic process. And so we have to recognize the cultural differences, but we cannot, in our mind, prejudge based on the skin color. And so a take-home message: microaggressions have a detrimental impact on psychological well-being. Awareness of one's personal biases, fears, and stereotypes is paramount. Understanding that microaggressions originate from privilege is crucial. Ding, ding, ding. That's really one. Microaggressions originate from privilege. Making the obscurity discernible should always facilitate increased dialogue. And so I want to make it visible, but it is to facilitate dialogue. And a good way to do that a lot of times, if I feel as if I've been microaggressed, and instead of calling it out by stating it, I will call it out by asking a question. Help me understand. Did I just hear you say Black people love fried chicken? I don't know. I'm just thinking of that something hypothetical. So, but I pose it as a question because remember, it comes from a place of privilege, And a lot of times people in privilege, they want to maintain that privilege. And so if you assert privilege over them by saying what it is, they go on a defense. So you come from under and say, and so instead of saying what it is, yeah, so you come from a place of under, help me understand. And so you take a base level or a low status, but really you're operating on a higher ground. Microaggressions are factors that can gravely impact clinical outcomes. And so that's pretty much the presentation. Here is a poem that I wrote some time ago, really just dealing with microaggressions. Poem is I refuse. I refuse to allow your issues to become my issues. I refuse to allow your bitterness to make me bitter. The cold glare, the lofty stare, that look that tell me how much you care. Less about my kind, less about my mind, or what I think and what you find. If you would let me be me, free me to be me, allow yourself to give a damn. I refuse to allow your degrading thoughts to make me degrade. I refuse to allow the denigrating messages to make me afraid. Grinding bone, I'm left alone. The Grinch-like smile, I don't belong. To your bougie clique, my skin depicts something of a nothing that makes you sick. And you don't know why, but refuse to try to bring yourself to give a damn. I refuse to allow your darkness to strangle my light. I refuse to allow your ugly to extinguish my bright. Isms and schisms is what keeps us from giving to humanity's sake. Is this really living, or a way of survival that we should be rivals on the easy road toward destruction? Damn, I refuse. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Nathaniel Granger. Yeah, thank you for a wonderful poem and your presentation.
Thank you, Derek. So happy to see you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we have the link for CE credits is in the comments for folks who need CE credits. And so, we would like to say thank you for everyone for joining us today. Thank you, to everyone who's been here, and Dr. Granger. Thank you to Roxanne and Vanessa as well for putting all this on. And thank you for Roxanne for joining from a wedding that is about to start. So,
does anyone have any additional closing thoughts or comments?
I would just like to say one of the things that really stood out to me, probably because I have children, is, and obviously I'm going to mess up what you said, but talking about how BIPOC people, when I think of children, BIPOC children, experiencing discrimination, why can't white children learn about it? And that really, really made an impression on me, because I hear so many people talking about race and talking about diversity in classes. And it's like, if we're living it, why can't they learn about it? So
absolutely. Yes. If we can experience, they can learn about it. Absolutely. Yeah. Someone asked about the poem. Yes, that's a poem I wrote, and I think I don't know. I published it, and I can't tell you what book that one is published in, but it is in one of the Human and Growth series that is found with started with Lewis Hoffman and myself with the first book, Stay a While, and it is available through University Professors Press. I hope I made sense there. All right. Well, guys, again, Again, it's good seeing everyone, seeing the familiar faces. I do hope that this presentation would be one that's most memorable, and that not only would pique your interest for further inquiry, but also too that it would increase your desire towards action. And so again, thank you guys so very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sure.
Thank you. Thank you guys.